as many of these things as you can. And then as you're gathering things, you're going to find that like you already have a flat, like one of the things you already got, like the flat thing is already wooden or like the round thing is already shiny, right? But I would suggest that you try and like choose a new material just so you have more. There is a designer, I think he was an architect in the 70s. His name is Simon Nicholson, and he came up with this theory of loose parts. And he said that like creativity is comparative to the amount of like choice that you have in an environment. If you end up with like a thing that is flat, round, red, and plastic, you're limiting your ability to kind of expand what you might do with these objects. So I have a flat thing or a nearby thing, my little like elephant phone stand, a flat thing. I forget what my round thing was. This must be my red thing. It's also round, like a little spice top. My round thing. Well, oh, it's this. I have a round thing, red thing, a plastic thing, little like juice squeezer, a wooden thing, this little bowl that my grandpa made, a kitchen thing. I have a set of chopsticks. I kind of cheated a little bit maybe and got two things because I thought it might be nice to have more than one chopstick. A shiny thing. I have a mirror. I don't know what this is going to do on video, but I have a mirror that I'm kind of excited to use. And a transparent thing, a pretty boring like. So the idea today is really just to like dive in and just start messing with the stuff that you have in front of you, and we can chat while we're doing that too, just about like the stuff or anything that kind of comes up for you about play while we're playing. So I feel like I'm always really drawn to construction. I mean, we talked about this, Nate, the other day. Like um, you were really drawn to construction toys when you were a kid. And so I always feel like when I end up with random things like this, I always like find myself like piling and balancing and like doing structures and things like that. Yeah, I always get really into like balancing things. I don't know why. In a dangerous way because my flat thing is kind of heavy too. So I don't know if I should be. I like the idea of I do this in my classroom quite a bit, like the idea of like building on a reflective surface. You know, so your construction is both going up and down. I feel like it's really interesting. As
I have
well.
a little thing to make sushi for my plastic thing, you know? It's
Nice.
fun.
Yeah, because it has different parts too, so it's like multiple items.
Yeah. And then I have this guy, which is for boiling eggs, which looks like a little ship,
Oh,
which is
yeah.
flexible.
Oh, yeah, it's flexible
Yeah,
too.
that's fun. And then, of course, the red carrot peeler, the giant.
Uh-huh. That's nice. I like that. It looks like a giant pencil sharpener. I like that
It
design.
does, doesn't it? It's fun.
Yeah, I love that. So I am an early childhood educator, have been for like 20 years now, and I am working on a project that is called Play Library. So I'm working on creating a community toy library here where I live in Northwest Washington, but it's also focused on a big part of it is that I'm trying to use Web3 tools to do it because I am trying to build it on chain so that it's community owned and governed. And then also our toy catalog would be on chain so that we can tell stories of how materials move around our community and how children use them. So I've always been really drawn toward open-ended play. I'm very like Reggio Emilia inspired, and have done some work, yeah, like lots of more like loose parts, tinkering approaches. So I am one of their first Web3 creator residents. And so I'm spending 4 weeks really diving into how to make this project happen. And this week has been all about the play. And that's a really like that's a word that can kind of be a little bit hard to define. It's very personal for everyone. And so I'm trying to find ways to share what I think play is. And so when we have something like this, when we just get to play together, use our materials, um, hopefully it helps kind of understand the kind of play library I'm hoping to build.
Well, thank you for the invitation. Yeah, I was just curious because I have been working, we've actually been doing more early childhood work than my team had been previously doing. So this year I've been thinking a lot about early childhood,
Yeah.
kind of play-based learning. Yeah, and I saw that this was like a cool open. I like online experiments too. So thank you for the invite, and nice to meet you all.
Good. Yeah, that's exactly what we're doing. This is just like a weird, big online experiment. And that's what's interesting about Web3. I'm not a technical person, I'm not a developer, but I find that kind of the playful ethos of it all, like it's a really, people are really trying to design really playful ecosystems for people to gather in communities around. And so I think it's possible to find some shared value around play, especially this kind of play, you know, like being able to just mess around with stuff. And then how do we create, you know, like a shared collection of materials that can move around a community and then get people to tell stories about those, so that we like keep increasing the value and kind of pulling people in, without it having to be something that costs anyone lots of money, or or makes one person a ridiculous amount of money. I'm really trying to create like a really like equitable community-based system. So yeah, and it's nice to do something with your hands while you're chatting about things.
And so is this going to be a physical set of materials? And in addition, there's an online resource? Is that, I'm not that familiar with Web3, so.
Yeah, I'm pretty new to it too. So the idea is that we're going to create a, there will be a physical set of materials. So like a library catalog, but it's populated with materials. Some of them might be what you might like be able to walk into a toy store and buy as a toy, but I'm also envisioning a lot of kits. I'm envisioning a lot of like open-ended kits, so that we curate those. So it's like interesting objects, because if you gave the things that you have in front of you, you know, if there was a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old, they'd know what to do, right? Like they would just play with stuff and figure that out. So yeah, the idea is to kind of somehow infuse like the value of open-ended play into the library catalog. And then another big piece of it is that because it would be, we would have that digital resource of, you know, the community that lives online, we would be able to give all of those digital tools to anyone who wanted to start their own play library. So, you know, us starting one here, someone can wake up and find our project in Cleveland and they can say, oh, we wish we had a play library. And we can just say, here's how you make it. And here's all the tools that you need in order to do that. So it kind of an open source software, but with, so like the play library, I'm considering like a public good as an open source thing. I think the hardest part about this kind of play can be like not being able to attach things permanently. A lot of people get really caught up in that. I don't know if anyone feels that way.
Yeah, so one thing I'm feeling like initially is just like, what am I supposed to be doing right now? Which is like antithetical to the play idea.
So when I do pop-up play events here, I do them in the summer. And I bring open-ended materials to community spaces like the farmers market and the library. And I have a couple of community partners I work with. And kids will come up and they'll start playing right away. And then the adults will come up and be like, oh, what are we doing here? And I'll say, we're just playing. And they're like, oh, well, like, what are they supposed to do with this? And I say, whatever they want. And it happens, you know, in all sorts of settings too. And it's fine because I think maybe as we're growing up, we learn that we're not supposed to look like we don't know what we're doing. We're not supposed to look like we're trying. We're not supposed to, you know, be incorrect, right? But we can be incorrect. Like there's no wrong way to feel like I want a marble.
It's also finding it hard initially to like separate what the thing is intended to be, right? This is a pen that's intended to write with. And then what could I do with this with a box that's intended to contain things? Like then I'm thinking, oh, what about balancing things is always fun. So then to think of it as a balanced challenge, you know, it's like, it's hard to like move away from what a thing is designed to do with how we might play with it and use it in ways it wasn't designed to be. But
so I want to show you this video. It's a hysterical video too, because it's from like a CD-ROM, like a long time ago, but it's my favorite video on affordances. And that's kind of what we're talking about. So let's see if this works.
Affordances is a technical term, sometimes hard to get, but it's really quite simple. Affordances refers to the properties of an object and the person. It's the relationship between the object and the person and what the person can do with that object. For example, What is this? Peculiar shape, peculiar object, but it has practical affordances. For example, it affords support. It's a chair, see? Very comfortable chair. In fact, as long as it supports me and is about the right size, I could use it to stand on. Rolls a bit, but it affords support, affords standing. In fact, it affords lifting, and therefore throwing. I could throw it at you. And hiding, see? It does not afford the passage of light. Therefore, it makes me invisible, useful to hide against. Lots of affordances come with objects that you wouldn't expect. So suppose I had a book. Handy, small, can hold in my hand. Obviously, it affords reading and turning the pages, but other things that you might not have thought about, like scratching, like if it's raining, protection against the elements. Pages, keep your place, fold down the page. Or need to make a note, rip out a page. It affords ripping, affords writing. Many affordances. The value of a well-designed object is when it has such a rich set of affordances that the people who use it can do things with it that the designer never imagined.
It's hard to look at a book and be like, what else can I do besides read with it? And we don't necessarily want kids to like throw books at each other, right? We don't want to say anything goes, again, back to that like risks and safety and things like that. But, you know, how can we, like, how can we like switch our minds to like see things in a new light? So if your scissors that you have, like, if they weren't scissors, what else could they be? What else could they do besides cut something? Or Steph's marker, like what can it do besides draw? But also because it's an object that could just, like, it could be its own object, or it has like another function that you could use it for. So I think when we curate sets of materials, which is kind of the word I always use when I'm putting things together in my classroom, like on a table, I kind of walk around and kind of invite kids to play with stuff. And a children's museum might look the same way. Like, how do you choose what you invite children to play with, or adults for that matter, and get them to actually play and see a new vision?
A project like this isn't something I would necessarily expect to be part of the Web3. So it's just cool to see the possibilities.
Yeah, I mean, I have tried to figure out how to launch this project for about 5 years. And so a lot of the kind of the two structures that you see most commonly, there's businesses and there's nonprofits. And I just couldn't picture either. Like, I dipped my toes into both as a, but this didn't seem to fit in either category. And late last year, I was just kind of doing some Googling and learned about decentralized organizations. I kind of think of Play Library. What I'm trying to launch is a decentralized cooperative. Like, no one is the executive director. No one is like the person who's at the top, and it's all in their brain. And if they disappear, it all falls apart. So I'm really interested in decentralization, especially when it comes to something that is a community good. And I couldn't find really a lot of examples of people doing things in early childhood with Web3 or things that benefit families. But no, it strikes me, and this isn't in a bad way, that like no one totally knows what they're doing. Everyone's really engaged in the process of it. Like, everyone is really just like kind of winging it in a big way. And I think that the loudest conversation is obviously about cryptocurrency. And so it's easy to kind of dismiss that aspect, but the community and organizational aspect and the people, the human aspect, and our ability to decentralize and share more it seems like a good platform for that. So yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thanks for letting me ask questions. I don't want to derail your session, but
no, and this session is really just meant to be open. Like, this week, I just want to, I just want to play and like talk to people about play. Hopefully, as I'm gathering people to be part of Play Library, like, I want a big part of what I'm doing during this residency too is kind of trying to set the tone, right? Like, it'd be easy I'm trying to set the tone around like the open-ended nature of play and how engaging and valuable that is. Not that we can't have toys that are traditional toys in our catalog, but like, how do we structure an organization around, around open-endedness being an important quality of, making sure that kids have the space to make their own decisions about their play. And a lot of that has to do with educating adults, parents, caregivers, that it's okay if a kid, does something in a way that you weren't expecting them to, uses the material in a way that you weren't necessarily expecting them to.
I'm finding that also, like, my mind definitely initially went through like essentially the affordances thing, like similarly before you showed the video, like, what do I do with this, right? And but I'm also finding that once I've decided on what it affords, I tend to be also stuck in the new affordances and like, okay, now what else do I do? Now that I see that this can be a base for the pen to balance, like now what else can it be? Oh, but like it can actually like be like a counterweight to balance on something else, like and it doesn't naturally occur to explore new affordances other than, like, I think in the product design, right, that what they're trying to do is find the affordance that most naturally first occurs to you with a button or whatever, right? And that tends to be how we operate, like the first affordance that occurs to us, but then to like be pushed beyond to like find other affordances is very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. I always struggle, like figuring out how to, maybe I should just make parents do this part, right? I always struggle trying to get adults to play, because I think as soon as they do, they're like, oh yeah, I should just let my kid relax and play, or they don't need to only be on their tablet. This is fun and engaging. So maybe it's virtual things like this, or maybe when because we all, maybe, yeah, or maybe this is our like, check-ins for Play Library. We get on camera and everyone plays while we chat about stuff, because it's just such an important value, and you have to like participate in this one. You can't just say like, yep, I believe, because you just won't feel that like intrinsic motivation that will like make people want to be part of this. I think that's a lot.
Yeah, I was just thinking also how like the tendency of kids to turn an object into a play object that it wasn't intended for leads to scolding. Like, be careful with that plate. What are you doing with that fragile thing? And like, that's like a really positive impulse in them. Would you consider incorporating into the play library like play spaces, or I don't know how that could work?
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the many big unknowns about this project is, and in week 3, my focus is really on what do we look like in real life. There's anything from having our own dedicated space where we have our materials for checkout, and it's also a play space, all the way down to like we have a truck with materials and we like pop up once a week, all the way to like I have to clear out my garage because that's where the toy catalog lives, and like people stop by. So it kind of depends on how scrappy we have to be. In my biggest dream, it's a physical space where you come by and we have materials for checkout, but also there's materials out for playing, so there's materials that are available for you to like interact with and play with.